right, let's take a look at how you can determine the theme of a text and then track evidence that will support the theme that you've developed, okay? So we're going to read a whole class text, meaning we're all going to read the same thing, which is different than what we normally do. We usually have independently selected texts that we read, but it's a valuable experience for us to read a text all together and all kind of see what different ideas we all have about the same text, and that's exactly how this will work. When I say determine theme, I mean I want you to decide what you believe the theme is, and there's not a hard right and wrong answer. This is not like maybe literature tests you've taken in the past where there's multiple choice and you had to select the best one, etc., etc. I want to know what you think, and really that's a more authentic way of engaging with a text, and I'm all about that authenticity. You're kind of having a conversation in your mind with the author and trying to figure out what you think that they're thinking, and there's no way that all of us are going to come up with the same idea there. So that's the exciting part of this, and that's where the tracking evidence comes in. As long as everybody can support their own themes that they've come up with, then all of those themes are valid. That's how it works. So, just as for my example that I could show you, I decided to do mine over Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. That's not, I'm afraid to tell you, that's not the text that we're all going to read together. I wish I had class sets of this book because I love it and I think everybody should read it at some point in their lives. I've read it more than once, but the reason I selected it is because I've been reading it aloud to my daughter. So it's something I was reading actively. So and it's a story I think a lot of people are familiar with. Not everybody, but a lot of people, if they've read it or watched the movie or both, it's pretty popular. So anyway, here's how this is going to work. And I'm sorry if I sound like I've been crying. I just had a giant sneeze attack, so I'm very congested all of a sudden. Anyway, here's what the way to whittle this down is the first thing you're going to do as you're reading, and this is kind of a little bit of a complicated process because you're doing all of this as you're reading, and you're reading something for the first time. The text that I've selected, I highly doubt anybody has ever read. Matter of fact, I haven't even read it yet by the time I've made this video. So it'll be an experience for all of us to have together. But basically, as you're reading, you're kind of trying to pick out what big topics from the text that are coming up. So let's read this together. As you read, you will notice that certain topics keep popping up and seem to play a large role in the story. You'll want to keep an ongoing list of all of these, quote, big topics, along with page numbers if you are reading a book, or if we were doing a play, it would be scene locations. Okay, I try to make this neutral. That's why I list both in case I ever decide to do a play. Please note that big topics are abstract ideas or concepts, and if you don't know what I mean by that, the good news is I have examples and non-examples to help you. And then as you go, you need to list locations of all appearances of each big topic. That way later you have a lot to choose from as you're searching for good evidence for your theme suggestions. Okay, so what does all that mean? Let me show you. So these are good examples here of what I mean by big topics, such as love, family, racism, talent, challenges. So these are big ideas, okay, or concepts. Sort of abstract, less concrete than, say, these non-examples like basketball, cats, camping, school. So these would be things that are like, you know, a story might center around basketball, but basketball is not like a big idea. It's the name of a sport or a game. Now, that's not to say people can't have big emotional connections to basketball. Of course they can. But the big emotions behind the sport, that would be the big idea, okay? It wouldn't be the actual sport itself, okay? So if somebody, through basketball, maybe they show a lot of dedication, okay? Or they face a lot of challenges. Those would be the big ideas, really. Basketball is more like a minor topic that those big ideas come out of, okay? Cats. There might be cats a lot in a story, or maybe it's a fantasy novel and some of the characters are talking cats. But those aren't big topics, okay? Camping, that might be an activity like basketball that's taking place in a story, but an activity is not a big idea. School might be a setting for a story, but it's not a big idea. So these are kind of some examples and non-examples to look at, and if you're still not quite understanding, we can talk through, just flag me over and we'll talk through some ideas that you're having to see if those would be good ideas for big topics. So you'll want to identify these fairly early on, okay? So within the first, couple chapters, first 10 pages, 20 pages, what are some big ideas that emerge right away? And you don't have to list as many as I did here, okay? I did a lot because, first of all, I was at an advantage. I'd already read Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone before and seen the movie more than once. So I already kind of had an idea of what I knew I would want to look for, even though I hadn't analyzed the story in this way before. So I was at an advantage that you won't have, but regardless, you'll want to have at least a couple, maybe 3 big topics that emerge that you'll want to take note of, okay? So the ones that I picked out for Harry Potter were family, teamwork, so these are more good examples, bullying, identity, kids trying to figure out who they are. Obviously, they're in any young adult literature, that's usually in there somewhere, okay, because that's what young adults are doing. They're trying to figure out who they are. Good versus evil, okay, that's prevalent in a lot of fantasy novels and science fiction for that matter. So after I got all of those big topics, those abstract ideas down, as I read, this is where this part comes in. I listed locations, okay, of everywhere that I saw those topics mentioned. So as I read, here's what I did. I just had a little paper bookmark, piece of paper that I used as a bookmark, and I had these words written down on it. And as I was reading, whenever these things came up, family, teamwork, bullying, I would just jot down next to that word the page number where that came up, okay? And then I would stick a little sticky note next to the exact text I was thinking of. Instead of, back in college when I bought all my books specifically for this reason, I would just write in the book. But you don't have that luxury, and I didn't want to do that either because I was borrowing books from our classroom library, and so I just use sticky notes, and I have sticky notes. If you need sticky notes, let me know. So that was sort of my system, and then I came back later and put them all in here. So I know you're not always going to have your Chromebook in front of you while you're reading, so you're not going to put these in here as you read. That would be kind of cumbersome anyway. I found it easy to just jot down real fast a page number, and then I could keep reading. And then I wasn't interrupting my reading over and over again, and I could enjoy my reading, and it wouldn't be such a chore that was interrupted where I was constantly having to go back and figure out where I was in the story. Okay, so after I got these topics down, I scrolled down here, and this author statement part is where I am now. So the next step is to pick a big topic that recurs a lot, or maybe by the end of the book seems to be the most important, and write a sentence communicating how you think the author feels about that topic based on how they wrote the story. don't be too general, okay? You want to be as specific as possible. And of course, I have an example and non-example here to show you what I mean by that. So a good example would be the author thinks that a person's family does not define them as a person. So maybe family, okay, was my big idea that kept coming up. So a specific statement would be that a person's family does not define them as a person, okay? Here's a bad example. The author thinks that family is important. As I say here, the second one is too vague or general. So here's how to avoid being too vague or general. Try to avoid these words in particular: good, bad, important, interesting. All of those words kind of might sound good in theory, but they're really pretty empty when you think about it. They don't really say a lot. If I just say family's important, okay, it's almost like a cliche, it's tired, and it doesn't hold a lot of meaning. But if I make this statement up here, it's a very specific statement about family, that a family does not define an individual from the family, okay? Everybody in the family is their own person. Maybe they're influenced by their family, but they're not completely defined by. See how that's a lot more specific than just saying family is important. So you'll want to make a statement from the author's perspective, what you think the author is saying through their art, which is the novel that you read. What is the statement that they're making about that topic? So to riff on my Harry Potter here, I think I'm going to go with teamwork, okay? There's a lot of citations here, which means it came up a lot, but also, if you're familiar with the story, just the way that it ends and the way that Harry's able to win the day with the help of his friends, I really think J.K. Rowling was making a strong statement through her work about teamwork. Now, I don't want you to think that you have to pick the one that has the most citations that you were able to collect. It doesn't mean that at all. An ending can change a lot, right? Sometimes you finish a novel and there's a twist, or your perspective shifts because of something that happens at the end of the story. So you pick whichever one you want. Just know that you're going to have to use these citations. You're going to have to go back and look through those and find strong evidence. Okay, so what statement, I have to decide now what statement I think J.K. Rowling is making about teamwork. So I'm going to literally start just like it says here, the author, I'm going to use her name since I know her name, J.K. Rowling, and I suggest you do the same with the author of the text we're reading. I'm going to say thinks that more can be accomplished through teamwork than through working alone, we'll say. Okay? Harry, throughout the novel, and especially with the big task at the end that they're able to complete, he relies on a lot of other people. So I think I can support that really well. Okay? Now, this isn't quite a theme statement yet. This is an author statement. Now, how can we whittle that down to a theme? It tells you right here. Transform into theme. Simply, I should say not simple. Proofread, Miss Harrison. Simply remove the author thinks from your author statement and then just kind of adjust the wording until it makes sense as a sentence. So I'm actually going to copy and paste it and then adjust it. Remember to copy, you highlight it and hit Control-C. And then you put your cursor where you want to paste it and hit Control-V. So I'm going to take off J.K. Rowling thinks that. I'm just going to take all of that off. And then I'm going to read it and make sure it makes sense. More can be accomplished through teamwork than through working alone. Voila. Now, it might seem strange to you, but we don't need to put it in these terms that the author thinks that, okay? A theme is more or less, it's a life lesson that a literary work is trying to teach. What you're trying to determine What is a universal truth about life or the human experience that the author is communicating through their art? So since it is a universal truth or something that's true, as I said, about the human experience, you do not need to qualify it by saying the author thinks. You can just state it as a fact, and then you're going to support how that author demonstrates this theme in their work. Okay, and that's the evidence part, which the next video will guide you in how to collect evidence to support this theme.